Welcome to GRE Snacks, snackable episodes about the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your GRE. A full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of GRE questions backed by our memory enhancing algorithm, a built in study planner and essay grader, and full length practice exams. You can try it out for free at achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to get 10% off. Now let's get started. Today, we've got Mike Bergin with us. Really happy to have you back on the show, Mike, and I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Tyler, always a pleasure to be on the show with you. I am a longtime educator. I've been in test prep for over 30 years. I am the owner of Chariot Learning, and from beautiful Rochester, New York, we serve the world, delivering individualized expert SAT and ACT prep. I am the co-host of the Test and the Rest podcast, covering education, testing, learning, and every other topic we can think of. I am the publisher of the TestBright SAT ACT curriculum system, the Roots to Words, Word of the Day, free Word of the Day system, the College Eagle newsletter, tutor of the newsletter. I am the president emeritus of the National Test Prep Association. Basically, I love having conversations like the one we're about to have, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you so much. And exactly one of the sort of time-honored topics, right? But I think it's really important, especially on the GRE. I mean, let's start, it's time management and then how, that kind of becomes stress management. And to start, why is time management so important on the GRE? What is sort of the thing that makes this a crucial strategy?
So the issue anytime you're taking a standardized test is to recognize that time is one dimension of difficulty. Basically, standardized tests are designed to make sure that test takers from every walk of life can neatly fit into some kind of standard distribution of test takers, which is to say that while the architect of the GRE or a different standardized instrument might not be targeting a specific bell curve, when you
Mhm.
administer a fair, valid, reliable assessment that's designed to rank test takers to a large enough cohort, test takers should fall within a rough bell curve where most test takers
Mhm.
should fall within one standard deviation of the mean. The fact that a test like the GRE has to tell everyone up front pretty much the scope of what's being tested. You are being tested on this many math topics and no more, this much reading, right? Like this many concepts means that a way to make sure that students don't miss points is close to the test takers. They can't just surprise you with material that you weren't supposed to take, that you weren't supposed to see. So instead, most of the difficulty is designed at the upper end. I'm not talking about the students that don't prepare and don't really even, they didn't even take the time to learn the math or anything like that. But the students that come in relatively prepared, they still have to get questions wrong because if even 1% of test takers got a perfect score on any given test, that would be a massive problem. So, how are they getting questions wrong? They're getting questions wrong because the problems are difficult to interpret at first pass, and because time is a factor. The test is never designed so that all test takers can comfortably finish all items within a certain number of provided minutes. If that was the case, and we all say this, we take the test, we say, well, if I could have taken the GRE home and done it overnight, I would have been much better, right? That doesn't
Right.
happen because time is an issue, that the students or the test takers who can be most efficient in marshaling that valuable resource of time and apply that to maximize the points that they can earn are the ones who are going to have an advantage on the test.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and I think it's also connected directly to stress, right? Like, I think that if you're worried, if you're stressed out about the test, having a time management strategy can basically give you a way to have a stress management strategy. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, think about this, right? That you know that you're on the clock You know that in order to get your best score, you need to be able to reach as many items as possible. If you can't get to all of them, you have to get to the right ones. And because the clock is
Mhm.
ticking, you may feel your response to stress may be negative. You may be thinking more about the time that's passing than the time that you
Mhm.
have. Have you ever encountered a test taker who, because they're so stressed about the time, they actually rush through and they have a big chunk of useless time left at the end of the section that they didn't use, and they have a bunch of careless errors behind them because they rushed through questions that they didn't need to rush through because they didn't adequately manage their time. So that stress component of time management is critical, and it is another factor that if a test taker shows up for the exam without a strong time management strategy and a strong understanding of how
Mhm.
to apportion that resource, they're going to feel more stress and they're going to fall right into the test maker's hands because that stress also with your if you respond negatively to stress, then you're going to perform lower than you should.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think you've touched on like a couple of different things here, that are kind of related, right? Which is mistakes and pacing. And so I want to start by talking about pacing because I feel like pacing is kind of like the underlying thing. I mean, how do you train for pacing? Either when you're taking your practice tests or, on the test day itself. How do you make sure that your pacing is on point so that when you're taking the actual GRE, you remain consistent with your practice?
So funny that people imagine that they will just show up for any task with a perfect pacing strategy without trying to figure out how long each piece of the task takes under normal conditions, under stressed conditions, under just like within certain parameters of accuracy. So fundamentally, we want to think about test taking the way we think about juggling chainsaws. Okay. I don't know if you think about juggling chainsaws a lot. I wonder about
Not
or
recently, no.
torches or whatever dangerous objects, you're juggling alligators, whatever, right? If you're going to embark on an endeavor like that, you don't start by practicing at top speed. Okay. You practice, you work your way up to it, you focus on accuracy. The main
Mhm.
thing is not to grab the blade or the burning end or whatever it is, the biting end of the alligator. The main thing is to make sure that your technique is right and then you speed up. So,
Mhm.
the right pacing strategy for any exam is to first work on accuracy and then improve your speed. You can't just focus on being fast, right? But focusing on being fast first means you're usually focusing on being wrong, but within a certain amount of time. And our goal is points. Our goal is to maximize the number of questions we get right. And so that's what anybody's time allocation strategy needs to be focused on. If you need a very high score, then you need most of the points. But if you don't need a very high score, then you can focus on accuracy and placing your attention and committing your time to the parts where you're most likely to get questions right. Where are the easy questions? Where are the questions that are easier for you than other topics? Where are your strengths?
Mhm.
Do you have a strategy that you've practiced enough that you're automatic with it, right? Becoming automatic through practice improves your speed while maintaining your accuracy. I know that you know all these concepts, Tyler, and I'm probably spilling them all out at once. So let me back up and just say, like, does that concept that first you focus on accuracy and then you integrate speed make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And I think that, maybe this is kind of a corollary challenge, and it's something that we're going to talk about in the next episode. Is like you only have so many official practice exams, so how do you make sure that you're like using them as checkpoints to kind of ramp up along the way? But there's also a lot of vendors like Achievable, but also plenty of others that have their own practice tests that you can try too. How much should you be starting this pacing practice from day one, or should it be something that you're focused on once you feel like your accuracy is high enough? And essentially, like, I'm trying to just get a little bit more specifics around what you're saying, right? It's like, okay, with 1 month to go, now you're getting more than 80% of questions right or whatever. now you need to start like getting the time down from 2.5 minutes to 1.5 minutes or something like that.
Well, think about where you are relative to your goal. Okay. People who are
Hmm.
starting this process, and I think in the GRE world, it's really common for people to begin the process rather rusty on their high school math. And so, in
Yeah.
order to do their best on the math section, they need a lot more than time management. They need to study the
Mhm.
concepts. They need to relearn the arithmetic, the geometry, the algebra, those concepts that are tested, right? That task precedes time management. Do that first, right? And it's the same thing for any section of the test where you're coming in and you are far from your target score. You have to start by building the
Mhm.
skills. That's not something that you dive in by doing test after test. I think is a big mistake considering how few official GREs there are for students to start by taking tests and then trying to learn piecemeal and then finally turning to a resource, turning to a tutor and saying, well, I've done all the practice tests, but now I know that I need a lot of help. Well, you've already used the most valuable material. You can use Achievable resources. You can use other resources. You can work with tutors or take take a class or whatever it is. If you're starting at a low level, especially if you're giving yourself
Mhm.
more than a month to get started, begin with the basics and get a sense of how strong you are with the fundamentals. By the time you
Mhm.
get to a month out, by the time you reach a point where you're actually scoring high relative to your goals, you're close to your goals, but you know that time management, stress management, improving your technique is the key to closing that gap between what you need and what you can earn. That's when timed practice really matters. And you don't have to do full timed tests every single time, right? You can do timed passage sets or timed question sets. But by the time you're a few weeks out, you should be committing to weekly timed practice tests. And that's the final
Mhm.
piece. I think that a lot of people they do the timed part first. They focus on the full tests first and they miss that chance to save the highest quality material for the very end for their polish. This is really common on the SAT and ACT side as well. We get students for on the SAT side, they've gone through all seven blue book official SATs and then they're like, "Well, I need to prep." Well, you've already used the best material. Everything else that you're going to practice on will be different.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Great. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think now I feel like we've covered pacing and prep a good amount, and I want to talk about actual test day strategy and kind of how timing factors into it. I think that the most obvious thing that happens, and I think this has happened to everyone on a standardized test, is that you get stuck on a problem and you start to take too long on it, and then you start worrying about the fact that you're taking too long on it, but you're still not done. And so, what's like how to avoid this kind of common pitfall, right? You're spending too long on a tough question. And then, how do you kind of like reset yourself after that fact and get back on track?
Big challenge that test takers encounter is that they have no sense of
Mhm.
how much time they're using. Okay. There might be a timer on the screen, but test takers like to hide that timer. They don't like to be taunted by it, or they put like a piece of paper over it. But if you don't measure your time, you cannot manage it, right? So
Mhm.
test takers should wear a watch. They should get used to using it, or they should put the timer up and they should get used to using it. With practice, you'll develop a sense for how long you're taking and how long you should take, meaning what milestones should you be hitting at certain minute marks. And it's really important to
Right.
manage that because every high achieving test taker that I've met has a good sense of how much time they
Hmm.
need to answer all the questions they need to answer. And if
Hmm.
you're trying to get the highest scores, you're trying to answer all of the questions accurately, which means you need to know where you are, you need to know where the difficulty patterns are. You need to know where your own challenges are, meaning do you tend to get bogged down on a certain question type? You also need to eliminate feelings of perfectionism. Okay. Perfectionism is a vice when it comes to test taking, in that truly challenging test items will always leave you somewhat in doubt of whether you're doing the right thing. Okay. This could be the math problem where you're answering it and it's a really tough problem. And so you think you're answering it the right way, but you're not entirely sure. Well, no one can tell you on test day whether you're doing the right thing or not. Nobody can tell you in the moment, yep, you got it, keep going. And so a lot of test takers, they hesitate. They wait for
Mhm.
a sign that they're following the right path, and that sign will never come. The only way you're going to find out if you're doing the right thing is to do it. So I
Mhm.
urge test takers to adopt a bias to action. I'm not saying dive in headlong without thinking about what you're doing. You should be importing strong strategies for every question type because those strategies will save you time because they automate certain things that you shouldn't have to think about. You should always address a certain kind of question. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and that should be your routine. But when it comes to the thinking
Mhm.
part, you should not wallow in anxiety or perfectionism or indulge your fears that you're not doing the right thing because you're just stealing valuable time from yourself.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that's like a good way of putting it. I mean, what I would also add is like, at a certain point, you've just kind of got to bail,
Yeah.
right? Luckily, with the GRE, you can flag questions and come back at the end if you have extra time. But yeah, like having some sort of timer is necessary for that, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to average a certain amount per question. Sometimes you're going to be above that by 30 seconds, but like you can make that up on a different one, possibly. Like it's, only when it gets to like you're starting to get close to doubling your time that you need to leave,
Yeah.
right? No matter
And
what.
and I mean, you make some good
Um,
points, right? Like flag and come back. Flag guess, right? Because you don't want to leave anything blank. Flag guess, come back if you have
mhm,
time, but also recognize that an average, if you get a minute 20 per question, you shouldn't be spending a minute 20 on every question. That means that some questions,
mhm,
through excellent strategy and insights into potential shortcuts, you might be able to spend
mhm,
20 seconds and bank that minute for the question where you'll really need it. Some tests, there's a
mhm,
big disparity between the fastest questions and the longest questions. Some tests or sections, there's more of a range that's closer to average. But whatever it is, you should know where you are. You should know how to gain time and you should know where to give yourself time. In that there are going to be some questions where if the average is a minute
mhm,
per question, there might be one or two questions where you'll need 3 minutes for real. But you should have saved
mhm.
that time for yourself. You should know this is bound to happen. Again, practice, coaching, experience all support exceptional time management and exceptional stress management, and they're very much the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's great. I only have one last question for you, which is a lot of times when people talk about this kind of stuff, they talk about, particularly with stress management, they talk about other things like breathing exercises or meditation or, even positive self-talk. How much do you think these are a factor in stress management? And would you recommend it?
Everybody has coping mechanisms, or let's
Mhm,
say everyone has coping mechanisms, but not everyone knows what they are, and not everyone has effective coping mechanisms. It is absolutely
mhm,
valuable for students to develop effective coping mechanisms for response to stress in the moment. I want to be clear that it's not stress, okay? Everyone will feel stress on test day. If the test matters, you should feel stress, but that stress you should feel should be the positive kind of stress, the stress that allows you to be present and deliver your best results. How do we manage ourselves when our response to stress becomes too great? All of those techniques you described and many more are valuable ways to adjust your response to stress in the moment. But the moment is not the time to try to develop that response. Okay. You need to practice them like everything else. Okay. For some test takers, putting down your pencil and stopping work for a minute is effective. Taking breaths, maybe 5 deep breaths or 3 short breaths or whatever your routine is. Okay. For some test takers, repeating a mantra, right? Just do it. Whatever your slogan is, your personal empowering slogan, something to minimize negative self talk and maximize positive self talk. That's valuable. For some students, there are other routines. And the point is that if you are prone to feeling the moment a little too acutely, then it behooves you to, in advance, master techniques. There are all kinds of supports, there are all kinds of coaches, there are all kinds of ways that people can learn to develop a sense of mindfulness, to be able to block out your fears of the past, your fears of the future, your concerns about the present, and just engage with what's in front of you. And I strongly recommend that people learn these things because they matter in a lot more contexts than just standardized tests. But test day is not the time to hope for an epiphany where you're going to figure out, oh, I heard that if I laugh out loud, that releases stress, right? Like practice that first and see if it'll play and your proctor will allow it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been GRE Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Mike Bergin from Chariot Learning. And Achievable has a great online GRE course that you can try for free by going to achievable.me.